February 2nd, 2019. Now, let's start, Mr. Parks, with a very simple question. If somebody never heard of you, how would you introduce yourself? Like very briefly. Who do you represent? What are you doing? What is it? What are your activities?
Well, I probably don't represent anybody except myself. However, I hope that some of the views and ideas I have are beneficial to humanity. So perhaps in a way, I'm trying to represent, that aspect of humanity. In terms of myself, I suppose I came to fame or infamy by going public with my off-planet experiences. My parents coming from security backgrounds. And then I think that developed to becoming fully aware that the truth wasn't being released to the general public. And so those connections that I'd made over the last 8 years, I was able to access that and start trying to get the truth out to people. So that's really what I'm about.
Okay, now when you say off planet, could you be a bit more specific?
Yes, so as long as I can remember. Excuse me, Ben, I've just got a bit of a cold. That's why I didn't do my TED Mile radio show last night.
Well, then we won't be too long then, I suppose.
No, I'm all right. That's okay. I'm talking about interaction with mantis, draconian or draconis reptilians, feline group, some of the greys. I don't like the greys at all. Some of those, a whole range of these beings ever since I was very, very little.
Okay, here's a question for people who are operating in what we call a 3D, like myself. Is that if I walk down, say, the London street, okay, I'll be able to see some Asians and some Africans and stuff, and I can tell they're real because you can see them every day. Mm. But most of us, we don't see these reptilians or these greys or whatever, shopping at the duty-free store or anything like this. So, why is that?
Well, I think actually, if you went to Vegas, you'd probably see them there, come out of Area 51, probably on a bit of a little holiday jaunt. But generally, you don't fully see them, although some people report seeing them, simply because it's been generally agreed that the humanity is not in a position yet to accept this truth. Now, I disagree with that. My point of view is that humanity needs to be told everything. We need to trust humanity and let them make the judgment. But at the moment, there's this view that the vast majority of people are children, and therefore they're just not ready to do it. So these things do go out there. They do go in disguise. They're heavily guarded or chaperoned, shall we say. And from time to time, very psychic people do see things which they report. And they even get as far as the newspapers sometimes.
Okay, well, that's another question. I hear a lot of people say that when you're dealing with aliens, it's not like getting on a rocket ship or getting in a sort of warp drive and going, many times the speed of light to another star, but rather it's like changing the channel on television or a different spectrum of the electromagnetic frequencies that they inhabit. What's your view on this sort of stuff?
Well, I think there are what I would call real extraterrestrials, real ETs, and these are ones that live in the same time frame that we do. And I think Charles Hall, who was a weatherman in Area 51, he talked about what he called the tall whites. Now, as far as I know, these are actually real ETs, which means that they take maybe 25 years to get here. So they are operating, without being disrespectful to them, they are operating very primitive craft, actually. And those arrive here maybe 25 years, but the mantis or the draconian reptilians, they arrive via, the ones I've seen anyway, they arrive via portal. So they are able to bend time. So when they arrive, they don't take 25, 30 years to get here. They arrive far, far faster than that.
Now, then, the other question for a lot of us is, why can't we go to the spaceport and get a ticket on a rocket to another planet or to the local portal, and go to a different planet? Clearly, we're under some form of quarantine.
Well, you raised two very good points here. The same reason that I can't go and buy lots of gold on the market because I'm not an elite person. So therefore I don't have access to the elite part of it. But the other section is that there is a quarantine around the Earth. There's a double quarantine. There was a quarantine that the reptilians put on the planet because they didn't want anyone else coming in. And then recently the good guys put a quarantine around the planet to stop the bad guys coming in. So we know recently that a probe has landed on the far side of the moon, not an American one. And although it's very primitive, it's the point that that's sending is they obviously got permission to put an unmanned probe on the far side of the moon, and they are sending a huge message to the United States of America and everyone else saying that whichever group they're in connection with has given them permission to start doing stuff on the far side of the moon. So there's a great deal going on. Ordinary people don't have access to the information, they don't have access to that, but those who are either in the special group military or the secret societies, they do have access, or at least if they don't have access, Ben, they've got knowledge.
All right. Well, all right. Look, as you know, I don't usually write or talk about this sort of stuff because I'm trying to communicate with the people, you know, who have the more
I don't
narrow framework.
A huge amount now either, for the same reason.
But I will mention a few things that I've personally dealt with on this level since we're having this interview. Now, you talked about the Chinese and the Asians having ET contacts. I was taken by members of a Japanese secret society that some people would equate with like a Yakuza crime gang, but they're not really. But anyway, they took me to a special temple in Ginza, and it was filled with solid gold altars, shall we call them, with strange alien writing on them. And these people told me they did connect contact with extraterrestrials, and they did it via certain ceremonies. But I personally did not, contact. I would see any such extraterrestrials when I visited this place. However, also when a member of the Rothschild family and also the British royal family arranged a meeting with some gentleman from a group called the Dragon Family in Singapore. And he said that if you want to talk to China, this is as high as it goes. And the person was an Asian royal, and this person also claimed they had contact with extraterrestrials and they had extraterrestrial support, and that if necessary they would put the planet under strict rule if we didn't stop our destructive ways. Now, the other time I encountered such again, it's always secondhand, okay, but there's one more time. The arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, whose nephew was recently apparently horrifically murdered at the Saudi consulate in Turkey. Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist. Well, his uncle, Adnan Khashoggi, is a very famous arms dealer who came up in the Iran-Contra scandal. Well, he sent a very beautiful young woman to one of my public meetings, and she sort of basically told me she'd been sent by him, and she was a honey trap, okay, a very beautiful one too. But anyway, she told me that she had had her womb experimented with and been subject to all sorts of strange treatment by beings that resemble what you read about as the Anunnaki, large humanoids. And again, this is secondhand. I didn't see the Anunnaki. But a lady connected to a famous arms dealer told me that they had experimented with her. So that's another, these are these little things that I don't usually put out there because they don't fit my,
Sure.
what I'm trying to do. But since you're on that area, I share you what I've learned.
Oh, that's
by
nice.
reporting.
I think, to be honest, that when people move in these off-grid areas, then they will come into contact, or they will have information that comes their way, which is not for general. But yes, the last few years I've concentrated more on the needs of trying to wake people up, simply because my stories, whilst I'm sure they're very interesting, it doesn't, from a point of view of the world, it doesn't actually take us forward, but trying to give people heads up on warnings that I'm picking up on, a counterbalance to what's coming out in the newspapers, that I think is more helpful during this very crucial period. Example, I don't want to be known as the go-to man on this, but somebody had found something on the dark web about 3-4 weeks ago now, which purported to be an audio recording of a very high current American politician torturing a child. And this had been got on the dark web and sent to me. So I managed to send it on to somebody who then, it went to Langley and had a look at it and came back. It only took 2 weeks. I was very impressed with that. Came back and said that it was confirmed that this was this American politician. They'd done a voice print check, and it would be added to some criminal charges that were in the production of.
Yeah, so, I've seen the video, or at least a very short part before I
Yeah, it's an audio. It wasn't video.
Hillary Clinton, yes?
No.
Okay.
Not Clinton. This is another one.
A different one.
Yes, and it's just an audio recording of a child being tortured. But
that would be Podesta then.
Yeah, you're on the right lines there.
This stuff's out there. A lot of us are getting the same stuff. Okay, now there's another one. I've been, again, I deal with this firsthand. I have, come across a group of people who worship what we call Baal or Molech or Set or Satan, and who carry out human sacrifices. And there's plenty of whistleblowers coming out now. There's lots of evidence. And are these people, why do these people carry out these sacrifices? Are they actually contacting an entity or getting power from an entity like they say they are when they do this stuff?
Depending on the ritual. There's several rituals. One would be to keep the group together. You have a disparate group of people whose only connection is through this religion. I'm going to call it a religion, just for the ease of this conversation. So part of that is to maybe remind these people that they are under the control of and part of, and they owe their allegiance to this. There are different types of ceremonies that bring forth an entity. You know yourself that the Rothschilds perhaps once a year will form a big circle. The big heavy chair in the side is kept, and then the entity will come in there and take a report from each person around the room. The other one is literally about drinking blood. Two types of blood. There's menstrual blood, and there's also children's blood because of the chemicals that it will give. Some of that will reduce aging. Some of it is very important to some of these beings that exist in a different format within a human being. So there's loads of different rituals, and depending on who is officiating, what the purpose is, what the star planet connection is at that time, the heavens is very important. So yes, absolutely, it's a fundamental part of their not just their belief, but their control system.
Okay, now is this? They still seem to be in control of this planet, but they also definitely appear to be losing control of this planet. What's your understanding of the current state of the battle for the planet Earth?
Well, that's a really, really good question, isn't it? And I ask myself that not every day, but probably once a week. Mainly when I see these rather ridiculous people writing things on the internet saying the battle's over. We're all in the fifth dimension. Everything's fantastic. And then I go out and I see things which just fly in the face of that. I think there's been a huge shift away from total control. I think if we're going back 10, 15 years ago, the planet was in a very, very, very cotton wool condition. We are now in a situation where key individuals, I'm not saying key individuals have been taken out, but what I am saying is key individuals are moving aside. Key individuals are either retiring, leaving the planet, for want of a better word, or just retiring, and there aren't the numbers coming forward to replace them because nobody wants to be the guy who gets shot at. Also, there are a number of people in medium managerial positions who are now jumping ship, deciding that this is not the way forward anymore. So the top group are still there. They're still in control, but the amount of control they have is no longer total. And if they've looked into the crystal ball lately, they know that their days are numbered. And yet, like an ostrich, they hope that by one more, it's a bit like Adolf Hitler, isn't it? The secret weapons. Don't worry, we won't lose the war. The Russians may be knocking at the door, but we've got a secret weapon here. And that's what they're doing. They're just hoping that something is going to come along, rather than sit around the table and say, okay, let's negotiate this. Rather than do that, they're still going down fighting. And that's not brave, that's just stupidity on their part.
Where and who are these people, and who are they?
Majority of them are in Europe, believe it or not. They're not in America anymore. I think it was Donald Trump that said there was more evil in Europe than there was in China or Russia or anywhere else. And there's a lot of truth in that. There are a lot of European families who can all connect to one family, but they've all set themselves up and they've become demigods. They actually lost touch with anything around them, and they just think they rule like a king. So Europe's got a number of families. America, of course, has individual people now, not just groups, but individual. They're fractured. They're in individuals. Some of the major organizations that we would, like the Rothschilds, we would hold up, actually, they're looking to reposition themselves. Certainly the Rothschilds are definitely trying to reposition themselves. And then, of course, we have a small faction of a Jewish group, maybe from Europe, not from Israel at all, Kazakhstanian area, who have their own vision of what the world should be like. So, yes, it's groups, but it's also individuals now.
Yeah, I know that there's one concentration in the Calabrian Peninsula in Italy. I know Milan and northern Italy is another. And then, of course, a lot of the trail leads to Switzerland. And in particular, I've noticed a huge complex that used to be controlled by Mark Rich in Zug, Switzerland, where it seemed to be the origin of all this 30 years of, we got a nuke Iran type of stuff that was in all the world's news reports for like 30 years, originated from there. And that they were controlling both Iranian and Israeli politicians while making it look like they were, mortal enemies. And they seem to be losing that plot too. What's your take on that? I mean,
well, I've always said to people, ask yourself why Switzerland is never invaded. Why does nobody ever declare war on Switzerland? And it's not just because that's where the banks are, it's because that's where the powerhouse is. And people who are declaring war or fighting know that when they come out of the war, they're going to, under this paradigm, they're going to need that organization. They need the support or the cover of that organization. And so that has actually almost been in a political war with Strasbourg in Europe, that considers itself the country or the center of Europe. So you have these sort of interesting power plays between politicians in Strasbourg and the old blood, if we can call them that, in Switzerland. And the puppet masters have to have some location. And I think that things are playing out now where a lot of these organizations that were manipulated are now saying, we don't want to play the game anymore. So the people are still there. They're still there in their power and position, but maybe their influence is reduced dramatically. Well, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I did notice, okay, we had a lot of royals abdicating. I think Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, now in Japan. And then we had a pope quitting. What do you know about this?
I used to do pictures of the Pope when he was just about to, the old Pope was about to give ground, and I showed pictures of him and showed how his physical body was deteriorating and changing. There are only so much things you can do to an individual like that to keep them actually ticking over and working. If you're threatened with a legal prosecution, or not in the typical sense of being taken to a court, shall we say, but in a different form, a lot of these people are told resign and we won't take action against you or leave your position, because I had this on the radio show where I was saying that I do understand there are some indictments that have been opened and they've been acted on, but not in the public eye. And I understand that, but I want public involvement, because if it's all done behind doors, there's no confirmation for the public that the good guys are winning. It's no good key players suddenly disappearing off the earth as if by magic, and yet, you know, people are still going to pay their taxes. They're still going to by the system. So Ben, what I'm saying is that what I'm asking for when I do my radio shows to the people and to the universe at large is for people to begin to see the good guys practically taking action.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we all want to see them, you know, in handcuffs in a Nuremberg style tribunal with the whole world knowing exactly what they did, because otherwise they're just going to, you know, replace one secret controller for another secret controller and try to put on a nice face until the sheep calm down again. I think